Hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Products and Services here at Alpha Software, and I am joined today by Dion McCormick, no relation, our lead solutions engineer, along with Sarah Mitchell, in charge of our documentation department, and Scott Allen, our senior designer. Today, Dion is going to go over, I believe you're going to be doing some JavaScript debugging. Find out if that's the case in just a minute. But we're also here, of course, to take your questions, and you can type those questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. Before we get started, just a quick note to any of you who attended our DevCon last week. If you were a registered attendee and you have not received a link to the recordings, you can send an email to guides@alphasoftware.com. If you let us know what email you registered for, that'll just make it easier for us to match it up before we send out the link. But if the email is the email that you're sending the email from, then don't worry about it. So that's it. Hello, Dion, are you there? Let's get started.
Yes, I am. How's the mic coming through? Okay.
Oh, it's coming through great. Let me go ahead and make you the presenter. And there you are.
Oh, dynamite. Well, I missed everybody, although I did see a lot of people last week. So for those I missed, and I missed you. But man, talk about I call it DevCon fantastic. It's DevCon fantastic. It was an amazing event.
Yeah.
It was just off the charts awesome. I really got a lot of really positive feedback from everybody who attended. I think people found real value in it. I got to give hats off to you, Dave, and the rest of the team for putting together such a fabulous online event. Not easy to do, especially first time, and came across nice and smooth, no major explosions, but more importantly, just an amazing amount of content for everybody involved. So I really enjoyed it myself. And to be honest, I pulled away a lot of really good ideas and thinkings and other things like that from the event. So not only did I participate, but I also pulled away a lot of really valuable stuff. So thank you very much, sir. And thank you for everybody attending. Also, great stuff coming down the road. You'll hear more about it soon, but the fabulous roadmap, there's some really incredibly powerful features and capabilities, sort of fundamental items. These aren't just like nice new little features, which I'm going to highlight a couple today that are in the latest release, but these are some transformational capabilities. One, and my favorite to be I love the calendar, but the form box is just going to be incredible just because it'll be easier for you to create your own controls and do other things like that. So exciting stuff that is coming from there. So today it's going to be more Q&A, but I did want to go through a quick demonstration of a couple techniques to do some JavaScript debugging. I got some really positive feedback from people saying they enjoyed it, they liked it, that it could be very helpful to a broader base of people. So definitely want to kind of share the wealth and let everybody else know. And then I have a couple user questions that came in. I'd like to kind of touch on those. I may not have the full solution, but I can give pointers in that direction from there. So with that in mind, don't have much of a slide presentation other than I want to go ahead and dive into the JavaScript debugging, and then we can move over to the new features that are in the latest release that I find really cool. Bottom line also is that we're here for you. Your questions help drive our content. Your questions are why we're here. So if you do have questions, please take the time to go to your GoToWebinar chat area or the questions area and submit your questions. The team will be looking at those as I jabber away, and we'll get to as many as we can there. And also you can send in emails to guides@alphasoftware.com. And then one last little thing is just one of the things that blew me away at DevCon was just the maturity and the capabilities of the Transform product. It's just incredible how far it has progressed. And so I want to make sure everybody gets an opportunity to check that out. You can go to Transform Tuesdays. There's going to be a great one coming up, which just shows you the incredible, powerful capabilities that Greg is going to show off, some fun stuff, some cool stuff. So if you haven't signed up, make sure to attend that because I think you'll find a very successful and very fun event for you, and you'll see how far Transform has come in terms of a really rich environment to be able to deploy things quickly, easily, but with a high level of complexity. It was very, very impressive from that standpoint. Okie dokie. Sound check coming through okay?
Yep, A-okay.
Okay. So, there are really two primary environments. I've jumped into the development environment here because we're going to show you this here. But there are two primary environments that you live in inside of a alpha application. And we really designate them server side and client side. So there's stuff that happens on the server and there's stuff that happens on the client. And the client can be a mobile phone, could be a web browser, could be, a desktop web browser, a tablet web browser, etc. And they're really two environments. And the reality is when you're in the server side, your server side capabilities are going to be done with XBasic. So in the DevCon, I showed some XBasic debugging techniques, tricks, and other things like that. But I also wanted to cover the fact that on the client side, there is also the JavaScript. So you kind of spend a lot of time in XBasic now on the back end doing your processing, your code, your other lookups, and all those other kind of things there. Things that are not done automatically by Alpha through the environment. And then on the client side, you're going to be using a little bit more JavaScript. And XBasic, very mature language, been around a long time, very mature debugging environment, makes it easy to do that stuff. JavaScript, again, newer, but it has a huge amount of support from the industry and from, most importantly, Google and Google Chrome. And I want to kind of just highlight a few of those things here and hopefully share some ideas and where you can go when things don't look like they're working properly. Now, one thing I do want to note is that on the roadmap, one of the other interesting items that was discussed and kind of was like a bullet point and really not a lot of time was spent on it, but I think it's very important, is that Alpha on the server side, currently our server side language is XBasic, but we will be supporting server-side JavaScript through Node, etc. And there's a lot of work that's going on there to make it easier for you to use those languages. And I think that's a really positive thing. I mean, it will be a transition. If you're comfortable with XBasic, it's not going anywhere. It's going to be around a long time, and it's going to continue to be a very mature, powerful language. But the industry has kind of moved towards a JavaScript. A lot of people are now doing JavaScript. Oh, let me hold on for 1 second, if you don't mind.
Sure.
A little loud in the background. Want to cut down on the noise a little bit, but the industry is going on, especially with the advent of Node.js. There's a lot of work being done on using JavaScript on the server side, and that's kind of nice because now you have one language on both sides. But again, it will be a transition. XBasic's not going anywhere. It's going to be supported, handled, etc. But what it will allow you to do is start tapping into a larger ecosystem of programmers, programming, and capability with this new feature. So I'm looking forward to that. That's on the roadmap. There's no definitive date time, but that is, I know it's been working for a while. Along with that are a bunch of really nice improvements to the development environment that make it much easier for you to integrate outside code and do other things along those lines. Pretty good. So when you're on the client side, you are running JavaScript. So Alpha, it generates an enormous amount of JavaScript for you. So all the interactions, all the checking of boxes, the populating of lists, and everything else like that is done on the client in JavaScript. You don't have to worry about that because all of that JavaScript is generated, managed, tested, hardened by the Alpha development team. But sometimes you'll want to add your own JavaScript into your application to do specific things, to do special things. Again, the sky's the limit in terms of what you can do. And then there's actually a lot of built-in functions that are built into Alpha that allow you to kind of tap into the Alpha ecosystem with JavaScript. So it really allows you to basically remove any barriers you have to what you want to do on a client side in terms of an environment interaction and other pieces like that. So what I want to do is just spend about 10 minutes here walking through, well, it's great that you can do that, but what if things go wrong? Because we plan for when things go right, but it doesn't always go that way. So I put together a little demonstration here, and let's go ahead and I'm going to comment that out. Now, very first thing I want to show you is that in JavaScript, comments are //. So if you want to comment out something, you put in a // and you'll notice the debugger, or I'm sorry, not the debugger, but the editor will highlight that in blue. So that's similar to the apostrophe in XBasic, but in JavaScript, it's a // So I have a little piece of JavaScript here, very simple, where you put in a value in the input control. It basically, when you click this, is going to read this and put the value in the output control, but append some extra text to it. So it grabs the input control data, merges it with a little piece of text, and then puts it out into the other control. So basically it puts it out in the output control. So I'll go ahead and save this. And I click save, and we'll give that a run. Wake up, machine. Okay. And so we'll do a test. I'll go hello. Hit there. And, oop, did I do that? Maybe I left in, oh yeah, let's see. Yeah, I left in my purposeful problem that I had before. We'll come back to that in a moment. But great example, what happened? That's kind of why you need to know JavaScript debugging. So, so I'm gonna go here, and yes, it works now, because every time you code, everything's perfect. Yeah, that's how life is. So everything's working fine, great. JavaScript is working excellent, but what if things go wrong? So as I mentioned before, what if I was putting this together and I put in a wrong command here, and I ran it? Now, XBasic's pretty good. It will throw up automatic dialogues and other things like that, but JavaScript's a little less forgiving. So if I go like this and I put there, you see nothing's happening. I mean, something's happening, but I just have no indicator that what's causing the problem of this output control not going there. So in that case, you're going to use the Chrome debugger, which is built into Chrome, that's available for you. So the way you do that is when you're in working preview, and I'll show you this also works when you're running in the browser. So if you're running the browser on like a client and not on your development machine, you can still use the same techniques. But if you'll notice down here, you have Open Chrome Debugger. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. That will pop up a new window. And in that window is a whole bunch of stuff I'm not going to cover. But I'm going to go ahead and clear this window. Notice there's a little no smoking sign, so I have kind of a clear window. So this is my debugging environment when I'm using JavaScript. So I'll go over here, press, click Move Value. Got a problem. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on the icon here, and you'll notice I can go open my other window, which just went in the background. Notice what happened. So when JavaScript detects an error, it will send out a message into the console for you. And the console is, just think of it as like print statements in XBasic or BASIC or any old school language. And it gives you, it could be sometimes cryptic, but it does give you enough of a handle to go find out what's going on. So for instance, you'll look in here that it's saying it's an uncaught type error, and it says dialog object set value 1 is not a function. Oh, I remember that set value. I was using that function in there. Now, I want to explain this coding in a moment. Let's go back in here and look at this. Look at the code, and set value 1. That should be set value. So that's how at least it can give you a pointer where the problem is from that standpoint there. Now, one thing I want to show for you is very important is you'll notice in my debugger, I have to, let's go ahead and recreate that error and do that real quick, because I do want to see this. Bear with me. Want to keep the error up there so I can show you what it looks like. Okay. Okay, so I can go back in here. I can go into here and I say, oh yeah, that set value, I screwed up my spelling, and it's very touchy, so that's where it goes there. But the important thing, I guess it clears it out when I get out of there. You'll notice when I want you to look at this, it says dialog.object.setValue. So whenever you refer to a function, one of Alpha's functions, you're going to use this dialog.object. Now what happens is when Alpha actually generates the real JavaScript that runs on the client, dialog.object means nothing to JavaScript. It's just whatever. So what happens is Alpha, behind the scenes, when it generates this JavaScript that will actually run, it takes and substitutes dialog.object with what really is running the object in JavaScript that is running on the client. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in just to have it there. I'm going to do a working preview. And we'll cause the problem again. Go to the debugger. And you'll notice here that it says dialog1.dialog object.set value. So this is different from curly bracket dialog.object because this is the real thing in here. In fact, if you look at the elements here, you'll see that the top level elements, this is the ID, there's entities in here. It's basically referring to what is really running inside your browser. So when you see that, you're going, hey, I don't see dialog.object. What's important is what's after it, the dot function, because in the process of publishing, it's substituted that placeholder with this official name. And you know, if you have a very complex user interface, there could be many different things on the same interface. So it can get pretty complicated. Instead of you having to master all that, you can just say dialog.object and it takes care of it from there. So now I've got that function. Now there's a couple other nice features I'd like to show you. First is that maybe this is a little bit more confusing. You're like, you know, I'm not seeing what's causing the problem. It's not that simple. So you have this ability to put in what's called the debugger statement. And the debugger statement is a built-in Chrome debugger functionality. And think of it as basically the debug one of XBasic for JavaScript. So all you do is you say debugger : that's all you put in there, click save. Let's do a working preview. And I'm going to make sure my Chrome debugger is up and running. Let's go ahead and make sure that, yep. So this is some other questions here. I'd have to find out why. I get those all the time, something like that, but we'll find about that later. So I'm going to go test. I'm going to do test value. Now notice what happened. This is so cool. You'll notice it says, oh, paused in debugger. So when it hit that statement, it will then show this debugger statement and pause the execution of your script. Now, if we go over and go into here, you'll see that, oh, interesting. We're not on the console tab, we're on the sources tab. And here is where we're at in our script. Now, notice there's a lot of stuff here. And the reason why is behind the scenes rendering and doing other stuff like that, Alpha has written a huge amount of JavaScript code for you. I mean, it's just amazing how much JavaScript code it does for you. And then it inserts your pieces within there so everything works hunky-dory. You don't have to worry about it. So you'll notice here's my debugger. You can actually see my next statements. Here's 10.434 var endpoint equals, and again, it modified that, get value, then my input. And so all of my codes here, it's been slightly altered because of the way Alpha translates it. But now what's cool is I have a debugger to walk through. So first you'll notice I can inspect things. I can put it over it. So notice when I hover over the input field, it says undefined because it has not been defined yet. So you'll notice over here on the right-hand side, I have a series of controls that allow me to step through my code. So I can use the step function here. I can use the step out of current function, step into the next function call, step over. So these are your classic kind of, you know, controls so you can step through the code. So I'm going to click here and step. Now you'll notice I'm on this. I'm still undefined here. Over here, I can set watches. So I could actually set watches in here. I could add one and give it a variable and do it, and it'll show me there. So all those nice features that you're used to in XBasic are also available in the Chrome debugger. It's just a little bit more, I call it messy. It's a little more complicated in terms of that. But again, it is JavaScript in the way it goes. So I'm going to go ahead and step one more time. Now watch what happens. It actually takes me into that get value function. And it's going to go through the get value function here. Now, I could step through all that, but I don't want to go through all this because I know that works. So I can just say step out of the current function. And what it does is it takes me to that next high level function point. Now, notice when I hover over input now, it did work. So, and you'll notice here that it basically gives you an indicator. So it ran this function, which is getting the value of that input field, putting it in there in test. And so that seems to be working fine. So now I'm ready to do the next statement. So I can step to the next statement and then notice my input now has been updated with the example. So it did that basically concatenation of text. Now I'm going to click here. now you see there's a problem, and it jumped into there. So I'm going to step out of it, and this is where I think Alpha does a better job of kind of showing you there. But notice I go here, I've got this little thing here. So it's telling me that is the line in my code where the problem is. And it's basically reiterating what was spit out into the console. In fact, if I go over to the console, you'll see that summary there, but you'll see this in terms of in context. And you can go down and you say, oh, what's input at this time? What's other things along those lines? Pretty handy tool. So this is the JavaScript debugger. The really nice thing is there are like a billion, actually I think it's 1,342 videos on how to use the Chrome debugger. So if you want to learn more,
we just added one.
Oh, 343, and this will be 344. Yep. So it's just crazy there. But if you want to, again, just search Google for or DuckDuckGo, if you preserve your privacy, to search for Chrome debugger, and it will go into a lot more detail, give you examples, show you how to use the step functions, how to use watches, how to do stuff, how to read this a little bit easier. The one thing I just caution you, and that's why it's very important, is that, again, you see my code that I put in is like 4 lines, but it's surrounded by all this other stuff. So sometimes you have to kind of weed through the other stuff because Alpha is doing all this hard work for you of taking care of all that stuff for you. And the way it does is by generating all this JavaScript. Now I want to show you one other thing. I'm gonna go ahead and stop this here. So we'll go ahead and get out of it. I'm gonna go in here. I'm gonna get rid of my debugger statement, but I'm gonna go ahead and highlight this other one. On line 4, I have something called console.log input. So this is the classic basic print function. So sometimes you just go, you know what, I kind of want to know what the values are during my script, so I'm just going to spit them out. So let's go ahead and show you how this works. So we'll go into working preview. And we'll go here, do more value, blue chunks, go to the console. So you'll see that I get the same thing, but notice what's here. There's a little print statement, test example. So when I said that console.log in the variable name, it just spit it out in this window. So if you're, if it's not a super complicated thing, you can actually, and you just kind of want to monitor stuff, you don't even have to use the debugger. You can just spit out a whole bunch of console.logs and then watch it that way so you can at least see what's going on without having to go in the debugger. Up to you in terms of the way you want to do it, but it's very simple to do. And the beauty of this is that, very important, is that this all works when you're running on the server. So when you're running on the server, if I open up this web page, I'm going to get this same environment here so I can inspect things and do other things like that. So I'm doing it within the development environment here, but anytime you're in a web page, you can open up the Chrome debugger and be able to inspect and do everything else you want to do there. So let's say you're having something strange is happening on the client when it's running off the server, you can use this technique to see it. Now, the number one way I use this technique is like something doesn't happen. So a lot of times what I'll do is I will embed a UX in another UX, and I will run it, and for whatever reason that UX doesn't work. It doesn't show. It's confusing. And the classic case is I did not set the security of that embedded UX. So it just doesn't show. Nothing happens. You're like, what's going on? I'll even have a UX that shows, but then when I click a button to do like an XBasic callback or something, nothing works. You're like, what's going on here? Classic case of a security failure. Now, if you get something like that where you have a UX that is not functioning, the first thing I do is pop open my console in the debugger. And sure enough, most often what you'll see is an error message here with a security failure. I think it's 403, forget. But it will say something, something not allowed. And that tells you, oh, I must not have set the security correctly, because the UX will display, but when it goes to make a call back to the server will say, no, 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 I won't do that because you don't have the right security stuff. But it doesn't give you a warning. There's no pop-up or anything else like that. So therefore, the only way to really detect that is to open up your JavaScript debugger in Chrome, and you'll see messages here. So if something's not working, I would say just pop open the Chrome debugger and check it out. It's going to take you maybe a total of 20 seconds, and it may often just tell you exactly what the problem is and where to go. More complex stuff, you can use the debugger, you can use the console log. Now, important is when you go to deploy this, make sure you go in here and put your slashes, because you don't want people seeing behind the scenes what's going on in your JavaScript. They can kind of read your JavaScript script, so I guess to a certain degree, you know, they can inspect stuff and do things like that. So there's only a limited amount of save. But from the standpoint of just making it clean, I always make sure I comment out those console.logs that I've been using for testing. So that's just a quick introduction to using the Chrome debugger as a tool to debug your JavaScript on the client side. Again, you're going to use XBasic on the server side and JavaScript on the client side. Now, with that said, I have a couple other things there, but before I move on from here, I wanted to go ahead and just open it up and let you know.
Yeah, no questions on the debugger so far.
No questions? Is it that
Well,
crystal clear?
you're doing an excellent job, Dion. Also, nobody
Oh,
left,
okay.
so that's good. You know, you got that going
Yeah,
for
I
you.
know. I'm sure there's a little burnout after last week, so it's from that standpoint. Well, good, good. If you do pop any questions, put them in there. We'll review them a little later. But handy way to go from there. Okay. So dun dun dun. Let's go over and I want to show you a couple quick things. We did have a release. This release was on. It's way up there. Wait, am I going the wrong direction? Let me hold on a second. Sorry, I don't mean to give you like a seizure by having all that stuff, but we kind of glossed over it. We did have a new release on 9th of September of 2020. You can find those here at the release notes. In fact, I'll go ahead and copy that and put that into the chat window here. There were some really cool, they kind of snuck in, slipped in a few things there that I wanted to highlight. I found very, very interesting, very cool. And again, we were so busy getting ready for DevCon that we kind of didn't really pay attention. We're going to come back and do more work to kind of bring you up to speed on this because there's some really cool stuff. But let me go ahead and I want to highlight a couple things, some bug fixes, good, always good. But the first thing I think is the most interesting thing is that we're starting to do two things. One is you can explore the database now right within the connection string. So when you look at connection strings, you can look at that and see that. Another thing that's really cool about this is that we're now starting to move to supporting SQLite for our test databases and the demo databases. Previously, we used an access database in terms of like Northwinds. And so when you created a, let's say you wanted to do you'll see in all of my stuff, I'll use a built-in connection string that goes to a built-in access database. But we found recently, our friends at Microsoft, I think, have it out for access. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. I don't want to have Bill Gates coming up, showing at my door or anything like that. But I think they're really tired of people building apps on access and they want everybody on Azure paying monthly fees to do their stuff. So that's my theory and I'm sticking to it. But we've seen a lot of, I call it fragility in access operating nicely in environments. Like certain things are kind of like libraries change and then things break and we got to kind of do it. So we're like, hey, we're tired of having to do that. But more importantly, we want to kind of modernize how we deploy. And one of the cool things about SQLite is that it's a industry standard, super well supported, super simple to work with. I don't know if you've ever used it. It's just a stripped down versus SQL. And what you can do now is when you create these connection strings, we build in a SQLite version of our databases. So now you can use that. And what's cool about SQLite too is that you can kind of deploy it to your server and kind of use it as like a little repository and stuff like that. So there's a lot of fun things you can do with SQLite. Long story short, you're going to see more and more of that now we have SQLite connection and you can use that for the test databases and for the demo databases and things like that. We encourage you to use those because especially if you're going to submit a bug report or an issue, if you can submit that using our sample database, huge difference because we can focus on the problem, not figuring out how to get access to strange data and things along those lines. So I want to point that out. Here's one, this is a geeky one and it's there. I think this is so cool. This is, okay, so I've been using the SQL lookup function a lot and I do have to give a caveat about that. It's very important for you to understand. So let's go ahead and go to SQL lookup. This is a fabulous function. Basically, I'll just drop down here, is that you can basically give it a connection string, a table, a filter criteria, and run it, and boom, you get the information back. So within 4 lines of code, you can basically query and look up. So it's very nice for just doing quick, like check this table and see if this information's in there. And I use it everywhere. Now, there's a caution. If you use dynamic connection strings, this will break. So you got to be a little careful. There's certain important things you have to do because you have to include a session variable, yada. We kind of went a little bit over that when we were talking about that. But so you got to be a little careful where you're using SQL lookup in terms of your system. But it's a tool I use all the time because it's just really small and succinct and works really well. Well, in the new release, they've actually enhanced it. Before, it would return a single value, and you could create that value to be like a concatenation of multiple fields. But now, dun, 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 you can do what's called SQL lookup multi, where you can make the call, but then you can tell it what is the information you want to get back, and it gives you back that information, those items, those columns. So I had to do some gyrations. If I wanted multiple items, sometimes I'd have to make multiple SQL lookup calls, one after the other, and that's kind of a performance penalty because it has to run a query every time. Now it's added this. So that's a really cool little feature. If you're doing a lot of XBasic scripting, I think you'll find that as a really nice feature to be able to do that. And so check that out. Again, if you're not using SQL lookup in general, use it. It's really, really powerful there. Now, the other one I wanted to show you was this, create SQLite. As I mentioned a little earlier, we're really starting to embrace SQLite as a kind of a great little tool to have in your development environment for other things along those lines. So we're adding more features here. So for instance, this one will export data from a database to a new SQLite database. So dun, 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 want to report an error? Dump it to a SQLite database, send it to us with that. That way we don't have to try to connect to your stuff and everything else. There's so many ways we can use this. And I'm gonna start using this on our demos more and more because now I can just give you that SQLite database and it's a single file. You don't have to install a server. You don't have to do all this other yada, 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 yada. It's just fairly simple. Now, again, there are limitations. You're not gonna do triggers. You're not gonna do stored procedures. You're not gonna do all these other things that modern databases. But if you're just looking for a simple kind of data store, SQLite is really nice. And guess what? It is supported on mobile platforms. So if you build a PhoneGap build through, or I'm sorry, PhoneGap through Ionic Flow, and you build it, you can actually include SQLite databases and put those out there so you can have your own little read-only kind of database environment. And actually, I think you can go both ways with it. But now you can create your own SQLite databases and include them in your mobile apps and other things like that. So just a huge amount of capabilities there. And the team is embracing this heavily. It's going to make life a lot simpler for a number of different reasons. So we wanted to highlight that and let you know about it. We'll go in and show you some demos in the next few weeks about how that. And notice creating a SQLite database from its source database and other things like that. And then there's a bunch of nice little, XBasic features and touch functions and badges. There's a lot of neat little things there. It wasn't a massive release, but it was I think an important one. You don't see what was going on, but the features were light on this one, cool, but light. But behind the scenes, some really interesting things are going on with the development team that they put in, debug, check to make sure everything's going in preparation for future things to happen down the road. Very cool. SQLite also works on every platform. So, different servers and other things like that, really neat stuff there. So I just wanted to kind of show that. The other one, which we definitely are going to cover, is the new video conferencing UX component. A very interesting, obviously with COVID and the world where it's going now, living virtual is even more important, especially from a work standpoint, and building communication apps. I mean, God, did you guys see how much Zoom went up or how many people signed up for Microsoft Teams? Or it's just been insane. And so what's interesting is people are expecting more and more that communication conduits are built into the solutions that are deployed. So as part of that move, the development team has grabbed the video conferencing. It's a third-party service. You got to kind of, it's got information here on there, but it's a really cool feature that allows you to essentially build in video conferencing right into your apps, which could be very cool for many things, especially if you have a field dispatch app or many other kind of things there. So check out this latest release. Again, we did not do it justice because, hey, we were busy. So, hey, there's only so many things we can do. And again, Dave and the team did just such a fabulous job putting together the wonderful DevCon 2020. I can't wait for DevCon 2021. We're already talking about, the learnings from this one, what we can do, how we can improve it, what other elements. We got some really positive reviews for it. I think the one thing people do miss that face-to-face kind of relationship, and I do too. I mean, there's something great about just hanging out after the sessions in the hallway and catching up, not catching COVID, but catching up. Let's be very clear about that. But that would be bad. I love catching things when I'm at conferences. It's my favorite thing.
Well, I didn't quite catch that. Hang on, come back
Yeah,
over here.
here, let me get closer so I can really catch what you're saying and what
Oh,
you're
terrible.
blowing. So long story short, thank you everybody who attended. We really enjoyed it. The engagement level was extremely good. The questions, the focus, it really was powerful. It was neat to see, and we just really enjoyed it on our side. I'm speaking for myself. I enjoyed it, but also I, look forward to person-to-person things in the future, but also more virtual stuff because it's powerful. You can put together a day-long seminar, and nobody has to fly anywhere, the costs and everything else. And you can create a lot of valuable content and go deeper than you could with just what we do weekly, which we try to go deep, try to do as much as possible, but there's only certain limitations by time and capability there. So with that, those are the things I kind of want to highlight it. I do have one other topic that is a email that came in, but I want to take a moment here, breathe, and ask Dave if he has any questions or anything like that.
Uh, there, we have a styling question, but I'd like to get to that afterwards, and I'd like Sarah's help on it. And it has to
Oh,
do with
good.
turning
Yes.
on the borders around a field and how you dig your way into alpha and make those adjustments.
So much smarter
Um,
than me. Much
the
better.
I don't know about that. Anyway,
Yes.
the other one has to do with quick question on SQL lookup. Um, does that work only with portable SQL? I think that might be the case.
Oh, yes, I think it does. Basically, when you
Okay.
use SQL lookup, it's got a limited set of, you basically put in they call it a filter, and I think that's important, is that you put in a filter, um, where is it here? So you give it the connection, the table, and the filter is a character. So you say, customer customer city equals X, but London, Berlin. So it is simplistic and it's more for quick and dirty kind of lookups. But again, there are tons of places you need to do that. And this just makes life a little easier and
Right, where you're
nicer to
getting,
do that.
especially when you're getting just one value, but it's cool that you
Yeah.
can get multiple out, which kind of makes sense. Like you say, oh, I've got this customer ID. Could I have their name and email address, please? That kind
Yeah.
of thing could be very
And it's
useful.
succinct. Look at this. One,
Yeah.
two, three lines of code.
Yeah.
And then it grabs all that data, and then that data is available in your pointer variable. So you dimension as a pointer variable, you get a connection string. And this is a little different. Before SQL lookup, if I'm not mistaken, it returned it as an A value. So it'd be just basically like text or something like that. But
Mhm.
this actually puts it into a pointer variable. So I can say p.city or whatever, and it just works. So this
And
is
then you have all
really,
the functions to convert them to JSON or whatever else you need to
oh
tell the
yeah,
data
like for
center.
instance,
Yeah.
there is also, good point. Let me show this real quick. And this is what I tended to start to use a lot more, but now I can go back. If I go in here, that's a good point. There's another cool thing here called SQL query. And again, as the person mentioned, it's kind of portable JSON, but you could do this where you had like select this and then it puts it into a result, but the result was a JSON. And so therefore I needed to, so this is nice if you're bringing back multiple rows kind of scenario. So I use this, but often I would get back one row and then I had all the data in that row in one thing. So I'd use this a lot, but now with this function, I can go back to using, I'm sorry, this, so I can make a call, get multiple columns. It's only going to return a certain record or a single record, is what SQL lookup. SQL query will return multiple records and multiple columns per record, but you have to convert it into a pointer and then manage it from there, whereas this does a little bit. So this just simplifies life, and it's really handy. I can't wait to use it more once I upgrade.
Very cool. I don't know if you know the answer to this because it's a newer function, but will the create SQLite function will it let you include views as well as tables?
Very good point. I do not know. Let's see, a
See
list
if I
of
can try to.
tables, blank all tables of the source database, it defaults to all tables. So that's good. And if you need views, I would definitely let the team know, because I wonder if that's doable. I mean, some things, could be complex translating it into it, but it is SQL dialect. So that's a great thing. So give it a try. If you're finding it's not bringing the views, which my guess would be no at this point, just reading the documentation, send in that request, because we want to know how you want to use the technology and what you could use for it.
Speaking of requests, and I realize that the person who asked this question, I think, we're going to answer separately, but just in general, let's say you get a new version of Alpha Anywhere, an official release, and you find it's not working with your app and you need to roll back. How would you report something like that to Alpha? What's the best way to report an unexpected behavior with Alpha?
Gotcha. So before you roll back, go up to your Web Projects Control Panel, go to Help, Send a bug report.
Mm-hmm.
And if you click on there, notice it's already telling me, hey, I'm a little bit behind. Yes, I know. But we do want you to check it on the latest version, because we're constantly updating and everything else. So that's why we put this in, is that we may have already fixed that issue. And most likely, if it's something pretty obvious, we have, but we may not have. So you can see here, it gives you the instructions for what you want to do. I often just click here for use browser-based email, and it basically creates I can copy this information. It puts in all of my information, so they know what version I'm running, etc. there and there. Now, very important, you need to include a sufficient amount of information to be able to properly debug it. And that's why I'm saying the SQLite will be nice, because if it depends on having a certain couple tables or something, we don't want your whole database. I mean, there's just not enough time to put all that stuff together. So make sure you're very clear and concise. Don't just send in a screenshot. We need sample code, we need samples, etc. Sufficient amount of information to be able to actually execute on it. But this will allow you to do it in the proper way. So this goes right into our ticket tracking inside the company. That way it's managed, monitored, and everything else like that, versus a random email on our contact us page.
The developers will see it right away. And if you follow the instructions, you'll probably get an answer right away. And if you don't follow the instructions, they'll get mad at you right away and ask you to follow the instructions. Don't take that personally. They'll do it to everyone,
Yeah, I have been on that end of that stick enough times. I kind of learned from there. There you go. Right. Oh, by the way, Dave, you had posted this in here. I want to throw this up here.
Oh, yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, very cool. Go ahead and I'll let you explain.
Yeah, right. If you need a client to work with your SQLite databases, here's one I put in the chat window. It's a free open source one. It's the one that our VP of Services uses, and I guess has been recommending to people. But someone here in the audience was nice enough to remind me that is what we are using. So it's SQLiteStudio.pl, and a cool little piece of software. Used it before.
Yeah.
Let's see what else I've got here for questions. And I think you had one more thing you wanted to cover also. Is that correct?
Yeah, real quick. And I'll
let you do that. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, this will only take a minute. And again, it's not a full answer, but one of our loyal listeners, Miss Emily Latella from Fort Wayne, New Jersey. If you know what I'm saying, it's going to date you.
No last names. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I know. But versus last week's, which was Rosanna Dana, who sent in that great question. We got that answered last week.
Absolutely.
But it was a question regarding, and by the way, there's another feature which I haven't highlighted. Notice I'm like old school. I know where stuff is, so I go to it. But now you can go to Add Control and type in what you're looking for, and it sorts it and puts it there. So that is a cool little feature they added. So you don't have to go digging through like where it is. Like I want the submit control. Oh, okay, no problem. There it is. There's the submit. Saves me like 4 or 5 clicks. So if you haven't upgraded and you don't see this, that's really, really handy there. So I'm going to go into test, and the question has to do with, let me go ahead and do SQL. I'm going to go ahead and connect this list really up to my built-in connection string. And we'll go ahead and do this. They asked about, let's see. I think I have to fix I'm in a different project. There isn't AlphaDO connection strings. This is where SQLite could take into account. Yeah, let's see. I'll go up, I'll cheat real quick. There it is. I have to point it to the database on here. Okay, cool. That's debugging, by the way. Or it's like
In action.
fixing
Yeah.
idiotic statement or mistakes is what I really like to call it. Okay, so I go in table name, we go to customer. Again, we're gonna move over to SQLite for everything. That way I can just send you a nice little package and everything's good to go. Okay, so one of the cool things about this is I can go ahead and create my list layout, and then it creates a list with those 3 columns in here. But Alpha has the ability to include, which is really cool, a checkbox select control. And we actually did I think we did a webinar on this probably almost a year ago or so like that. So FYI, search the previous webinars, and thank you very much in terms of our team is spending a lot of time and effort to annotate and extract the information on those things there. Scott's done a fabulous job.
Yeah,
But
shout
this
out to
allows,
Scott there. Yep.
yeah, that's Scott. Yeah, and it's so punishing. He has to listen to me all the time.
He
Which is,
watches them once, and then he has to go
yeah.
back and watch them another one time, and then write down what's in it. I know
He
it's like,
keeps talking about the Constitution and something to do with cruel and unusual punishment or something.
I know exactly.
I am
That's what you
not a
get.
constitutional scholar, but so if anybody knows, kind of take, let me know about that stuff because he keeps complaining about it. I'm like, I don't know, call the Supreme Court.
Yeah,
They're not
exactly.
busy. Those guys are just sitting around. Okay, so notice here. Now you'll notice that I've enabled it, but I don't have it here. But now I can go in here, go to my list control, and you'll see there's a checkbox select, and I can put it on there. And then working preview, we now have the ability. So what's neat is there's a checkbox select capability, much like the grid component built into it. And actually it looks much nicer. And you can tailor this, make this look cool. It's really, really powerful there. Now, once you have that, there is a built-in function to get the checked rows. And let me see if it's actually in here. Bear with me real quick. I should know, this is where as far as I got, I wanted to show the person where that was at. But if we go here, and let me just go add in a button. Let's just go ahead and put a button. Look at how fast that goes. Even faster, okay? So JavaScript, I'm gonna go ahead and I think here it is right here. So there's a function in here called get checked rows, and it's a JavaScript function. And so what you can do here is, and this is client side, by the way, there is a server side equivalent. You can do this too, but I just don't know it off the top of my head. But even as a hack, what you can do is you can put a hidden text field. When the person says, okay, I want to process these checked items, just put this information in that checked field, and then you can do an edate.submitted.hidden field to get that. But you'll see here that basically you get a pointer to the list object, and then you run this, and then this gets an array of row numbers that are checked. So let's go ahead and actually insert that there. So actually, let's do this real quick. I'm going to I know there's another question, so let me finish this real quick. Get checked rows. Notice you can set checked rows. Jeez, okay. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say var checked rows is equal to, and then I'm going to say dialog.object set value, and I'll call this hidden, is for my hidden field, and I'll go checked rows. Let's see if this works. I wonder if it spits it out properly. So now I'm going to go here and I'm going to go ahead and put in a text box. And I'm just going to call that hidden. So it's on there, and I'll put it up in the top. It normally would be hidden. So now let's give this a try. So the idea behind it is that this little function will copy those into my, okay, so I can click here and test it. And there you go. Now notice what it's there. It's 0, 1. Okay, so what it's giving you is the order. So this is row 0. So if I go like here, this should be 2 and 3. So there may be some processing, but it gives you some rows there. I think there's another one that will actually get the primary key from each row, but I have to double check it there. But I just want to give you the pointer. I apologize I don't have a full answer. It kind of came in late, But check that out. Check out these functions here. And then you can also check out, there is some XBasic where you can get the checked information on the Ajax callback. And we can go through and explore that a little bit more if you still need some pointers here. But bottom line is you have the ability to use checks in your rows. And that's really nice from the standpoint of being able to process things in a bulk level. Like I have these 3 items and I want to select those 3 out of the list and then perform an action item. So thanks for that question. Get it in earlier. You get more data.
And someone did in fact ask, is there an option to return the primary key, which I could see being super useful, probably even better than the row number.
And just to point you in another direction, you can explore this a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and add another button here. And in this case, I'm going to do something here. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to do an Ajax callback, and I'm going to do, process rows. But here is an important new feature that came fairly recently. It's called submit data from the list controls. If you enable that, then what will happen is when it's sent back to the well, let's go ahead and do we have a minute? Do we got a minute to try this here? Let's say go ahead and copy.
We've got a minute.
Okay. So the idea is what will happen is it will send it back, and when I send that information back, if I submit this, then it puts it into E dot, and be very careful, underbar list data. So let's go ahead and go there. Let's go to server side. We'll go my stuff is equal E dot underbar list data, and I'll put a debug here. And then I'll just say test equals 1 plus 1. So we can just do that. Okay, so let's give this a try. So what is going to happen is now it's going to give me, and again, be a little careful on this. Oh, that's on dialog initialize. What an idiot. We don't want to put it there. Oh, that's going to go bad. Oh, good. Whew. It doesn't go here. It goes over into my XBasic function that I created. Silly. Okay. So now let's do that here. So what's going to happen is when I click on this, it's going to send everything back in the list data. And you could always do that, but it required a little bit of coding to get it done, but now it does that for you. So I'll click here. It runs my XBasic callback. Here's debug 1. Go to my stuff. Now, let's look and see what it returns. So it returns all this data. So here's my stuff. And this is JSON. Okay, so let's convert that into a pointer so it's easier to use. So I will go, I'll go, my pointer is equal to, oh my gosh, it's equal to JSON parse. So I'm going to convert that JSON that came back to a pointer, and then it's easier to manipulate. So let's test that out and do that there quick. So we may not have to get back to them after this. So I'll select a couple rows here and click here. So the first thing it does is notice it grabs that JSON from that list control. Very careful, if you have multiple list controls, you got to kind of figure out because it's going to return an array of list controls. Now I'm going to do that. Now I've got a pointer array. So you'll notice that pointer array 1, there's my list. My first list is pointer list 1. Now here's all the data in it. And here's the data from there. So I'm not seeing the checked column in here, so there must be a different way to do that. But this is nice just to be able to see what that data is when it comes back.
Very cool. There's also there is a JavaScript way actually that Sarah has pointed us to.
Stall long enough. Yes.
Chat. If you stall long enough, Sarah will give you the answer. It's pretty much.
Yeah, I know.
Speaking of Sarah, are you there? And can you answer a quick question about styling?
I can, yeah.
Cool. So the question is, in Dion's example, he's using a style that the text box only has a line at the bottom. This person would like to see all 4 lines displayed. Can you just show can you either demo or explain to, or have Dion follow your instructions for showing all 4 borders?
Well, actually, I built a demo.
Oh, you already built a demo. Well, of course. Of course. Yeah. I'm sorry. I don't know why I wouldn't think that. All right. I got to go ahead and make you the presenter then.
Great.
Show off.
right.
Making me look bad.
All right, and there's your screen. I see it.
Great. So the question was, how do you make these text boxes, text areas, etc.? How do you put a line around them? So I'm going to show you the final result. So this is the default out of the box with our system themes, and there's actually an option built in where you can have the line all the way around. And that is simply by changing the subtheme over here from the base, which is going to be used if it's not set at all, to primary. So if I click this button here, you can actually see there's two subthemes available for edit controls, the out of the box one and then primary. And one of the things we did recently was whenever you add a control like a text box, there's actually oh, there isn't. That might be, it works for button. If you have a button, we did that with button.
I remember
We didn't
button
do it
has
with
got like a
everything.
drop down
Yeah.
or something for it.
Yeah, so button has this, and maybe it'd be worthwhile to add that option for other things, but you can, while you're adding buttons, pick the sub theme right here, and it will remember what you chose last time. That's not the case with text areas and text boxes, apparently. But if you set it once, you can actually use this paste properties into multiple controls at once and paste that into all of these ones here.
That is, can you also go over that little feature there for those people who missed it? I use this all the time when I say, oh, I need this to be the same in every control. Can you show the paste properties thing just a little bit?
Yeah, so right up here between stack of boxes and find, there's a eyedropper or turkey baster, however you want to think of it. And if you click on it, while a property like subtheme is selected, you can actually use this to select a bunch of controls and set those properties to the value here for all of those controls that have the same property. It doesn't work for everything. You can't use it to copy the control type to a bunch of different controls or security settings, but for stuff that's like a checkbox or some basic text, it's very handy.
Oh,
And
super
you can
handy.
even go further with this, and there's an option to use XBasic, and then we have some functions in here to like wrap text dictionary tags around every single control that can support it, kind of stuff. So you can really go a long ways with this if you want to get super advanced.
Awesome, very cool. Someone actually, back to the XBasic way of selecting rows, someone was nice enough to actually create some sample code in XBasic while this is happening. So everyone's showing off today. I'm going to paste that sample code. Thank you very much, Chris, for pasting that in. And now that's in the box. The other thing, and it looks like we are almost out of time. The other thing is that I have pasted into the chat window an alternate SQLite viewer. Just in case you're having problems with SQLite Studio.pl, there's another one called SQLite Browser.org. You can use that one as well. And apparently people might have a little bit better luck with that one.
And reality is you can also just go in and edit the file directly. I mean, it's so simplistic for certain things.
Oh, that's, yeah. What does it look like on the inside of one of those files?
They're super, it's just text. It's just a text file.
Really?
It's crazy. Yeah. Yeah,
wow.
It's really neat.
I always thought they were magic, like MDB files, where you couldn't make heads or tails of it unless you had a driver. Okay, that's kind of neat.
You just don't touch the cold fusion reactor when you're in. That's all I ask you not to do.
Or the flux capacitor. Right?
The flux capacitor.
Excellent. Well, it looks like we have, let me look through here, chunk through the questions that we can answer. We have a suggestion for another one where we do for another session where we do Twilio, where we're getting responses back rather than just sending answers out or sending messages out. That would actually be kind of an interesting one. So we'll look into that. So anyway, Dion and Sarah, thank you very much for presenting today. Scott, thanks for standing by and for all of your hard work in annotating each of these things before they go up online. If you do have more questions, you can send them to guides, GUIDES @alphasoftware.com. Thanks a lot to everyone who attended and asked questions as well. We hope to see you at next Wednesday's Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. Thanks again. Bye-bye.